It's Monday, game day. United States men back into Nations League action tonight. Trinidad and Tobago in Port of Spain. The United States bring in what looks and feels, and please God, will be an insurmountable 3-0 lead from the first leg last Thursday night. That is the story on paper. But the reality of what we saw, the reality of what we lived through in those 90 minutes in Austin feels, well, very different, because even without our injured Lord and Saviour, Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah also out with hamstring knack, we wanted to treat this 99th ranked team a bit like France treated Gibraltar. Instead, it was more like watching Manchester United treat, well, any opponent. Lots of possession, but sterile possession. And it took until the 82nd minute for the United States to find the back of the net. 3 goals in just over 7 minutes, kind of padded the score. One of our GFOPs on the post-game YouTube live, which was really bloody great. He was a Chelsea fan, and he came on and he said, I thought the 4-1 win we had over 9-man Tottenham was the worst win feeling that I would experience this season. But the game in Austin topped it. Even Fox Sports headlined it as, quote, a disappointing win. And when you lose Fox Sports, well, I don't know what to say. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times on Thursday night. Some lovely moments. Ricardo Pepi just will not be deterred in a US jersey. The chip on his shoulder, doing magnificent work. Gio Reyna also emerging with creative plaudits late on. United States are on the cusp of qualification for next summer's Copa America. That's the good news. Happens automatically with a quarterfinal win as they take the field for the return leg in Trinidad tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT and also Universo. It's Thanksgiving week, and I'm thankful to be able to break all of this down with a beautiful mind. Former US men's national team striker turned ESPN broadcaster, turned Men in Blazers media network, Gento Wonder, the host of our incredible Vamos podcast. He's also my friend. It's Mr. Hercules Gomez. How are you doing, Herc?
I'm doing beautiful, Raj. You know, that's the one thing I miss the most as a player were your introductions. No interview or no collaboration was as great as your introductions. Everybody else was just right to the questions, which, sometimes I appreciate, but it's kind of nice to feel, wanted.
Oh, Herc, now you're a broadcaster and you actually write my introductions, which is a secret, which I don't want to know. But
you say that laughing, but there are a few colleagues that I have who will tell you to ask them something, and after you ask them something, they will say, great question.
It's amazing. I love couldn't have asked a better question myself. But let's dive into it. Trinidad and Tobago, population 1.5 million people, about as big as the city of Philadelphia, 99th in men's football in the world, down to 10 players from the 37th minute onwards after the fantastically named Noah Powder picked up his second yellow card. And the ensuing US performance against a callow squad, USL, Canadian League, domestic Trinidadian footballers for the most, 3-0 on the scoreboard. But anyone watching it knew could easily have been 0-0. Could even been a sucker punch 1-0 to be candid. That first half in particular, the US were worse than Kim Mulkey. 0 shots on target against 10 men. 76% possession. This team, Greg Berhalter, talks about changing the way the world sees American soccer. Even he admitted post-game, we lacked a little bit of precision, and you see there was a lot of moves in the first half. There were pretty good moves, just the final pass was missing. You said, Herc, the scoreline doesn't reflect the game. 4 days on now. Head of tonight's second leg. Smoke has cleared. How are we feeling?
A little bit more at ease. But definitely during that game, Raj, it just felt like, not again. Not again. And I'm not just talking about 2018 World Cup failure, where in Trinidad and Tobago, they lost that game. It's that feeling of, why can't we see a good showing with Greg Berhalter? I mean, there's been 5 games already. 4 of them are wins. One's a loss versus Germany. But if you look at those 4 wins where they scored 3 goals, 4 goals, 4 goals, 3 goals, including this Trinidad and Tobago, none of them make you feel really good. Maybe that Ghana first half, and that's about it. So you're left asking why. So here I am, a few days after game day tonight, asking myself why.
Well, let's dive into that why question mark. And I want to start by raising a third first Bud Light of the day to victory, which is ultimately bloody important. I will say I never tire of watching these boys celebrate, and more on that issue to come. But first question before we dive in defense of the United States men, and you live this, Herc, as yourself, a US international. I spoke to a couple of the players last week, and they were like, you guys need to understand this compressed window, the amount of football that's being packed in to this window. One of them said to me, we arrived Monday, train like once. We had maybe one recovery session. Then we're on the field and we're playing, i.e., the United States looked like a team who hadn't trained together because they largely had not been able to. Is that in any way, before we dive into the individual aspects, is that a defense? Or are you like, guys, even bearing that in mind, this performance still was not very good?
Yeah, I think it's a fair criticism, Raj, to say, given all that in mind, the performance versus a team who never once tried to threaten you, were dedicated to actually defending in their own box, never once did you seem comfortable or did you seem like you were in control in the way we thought you would be. The first shot on goal was in the 55th minute, Raj. 55th minute. You had all this possession with no penetration. We're trying to have a World Cup baby here. You got to penetrate. You've got to be dangerous. So that's a little disheartening. I will say, I know the complexities. I know the difficulties of facing this type of team, whether it's at home or whether it's away. It's very complex. It's you pretty much have everything to lose because people expect you to play a certain way. But you spoke about the U.S. men's national team's difficulties of not training together, of not having enough sessions or repetitions. I mean, Trinidad and Tobago has been gutted since Jack Warner left. Well, you and I just found out that Joe Public no longer exists.
We were horrified. The great Trinidadian club. The end of last podcast, Herc just dropping knowledge was like, yeah, I'm more of a Joe Public kind of guy. Quick Google. We found out their greatest team. It's Claps, Jack Warner. I mean, if there's not the embezzling, when you take away the embezzling, it hurts football. It hurts football. But yes, procedure. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're
Joe
absolutely
Public,
right.
The great team, gone.
That's great context because people need to realize for whatever excuse you want to throw out for the U.S. men's national team and their way, you gave a quick kind of dissection of who Trinidad and Tobago is today. USL players, Canadian Premier League, domestic league. Like, I don't care what the excuse is. You're better than your first shot on goal being in the 55th minute. Forget the rankings.
So let's dig deeper into this. Let's dig deeper into the lessons that the United States should be taking from that first game as we approach kickoff tonight. A game, it should be noted, in which TNT, mostly 10 men, they didn't manufacture a shot the whole game or even a bloody corner. And you said post-game, and this was a Herc quote, this was an easy game that the US men made difficult. You saw a night, you talked about how this was a night of questionable decisions tactically. What were they, Herc? Explain them to us calmly, and if you can, simply. Questionable decisions tactically.
Let me tell you a big issue I have today with modern football. Everybody wants to be Pep Guardiola. Everybody wants to be the new Julian Nagelsmann. Everybody wants to all of a sudden read Pep Guardiola's book, A Different Way of Winning, and think they understand the game and that they can manipulate the pieces and pawns. And it's that easy. Football is a very simple sport. The people who complicate it, us the players, us the coaches, we overcomplicate this game. You didn't have to, per TNT, the broadcast, when they spoke to Greg Berhalter, he had a 4-2-2-2 formation. What are you doing when you're trying to dissect a team like Trinidad and Tobago? Be who you are. Don't think because it's a game in front of your people, you have to show how smart you are. In this game, and it's very simple, when you play 4-2-2-2, that's a very narrow setup, Raj, against a team that you know will bunker in in their own 18. You're playing right into their hands. And in this very narrow setup, you set a few players up to fail, most notably Kevin Paredes. Kevin Paredes is a wide player. He plays as a winger or a wingback at Wolfsburg. He's played as a winger or wingback for DC United. Open space, isolation, 1v1. That's how you break these tactical schemes. And then the rest of the opposition has to make up for it, and you can break down teams very easily. But if you put him in a situation where he's an inverted winger, a position very foreign to him, in spots of the field and against opposition that are very foreign to him, it's a little complicated. Now, that said, Kevin Paredes didn't do well. Malik Tillman is a very creative player, and he's on a tear in PSV, playing in a position that suits him, in a central position. And I'm not saying he should start over Giovanni Reyna, but when I saw the setup and both he and Giovanni Reyna were in the lineup together, I had my doubts of how they would coexist, and I thought one would be thrown out wide. I didn't feel that he felt comfortable, that he felt he was in positions to succeed. I will repeat again, Malik Tillman and Kevin Paredes should do better in the situations they had and that were presented before them against Trinidad and Tobago, but Greg Berhalter did not set them up in positions to succeed.
It is fascinating. Two things. I mean, Herc, I love your analogy that everyone looks at Pep Guardiola and is like, that's how we must play football. Because my kids just finished captaining a high school football season where his team, was half very good footballers and half just athletes who were playing football for the school, and watching them try and play out the back. And I know their coach, who's from a youth development academy, has been told that's what real football is. But I said to him after the season, I was like, mate, these kids can barely kick a football. Some of these kids, this is not possession football, playing it out the back style. And you're almost saying, we don't have to play like that just because it exists. We should play to our strengths. And I think living out the Thursday night experience, I was delighted when the starting lineup was announced. I know so many of our listeners were too. 21-year-old PSV wonder Malik Tillman, 20-year-old Wolfsburg dagger Kevin Paredes, both shiny new toys, both soaring in European club play. As you say, though, both underwhelmed. You've articulated partially why, the deployment. Neither of them have been empowered to thrive with their clubs in that way. Very quickly, how do they leave now, Paredes and Tillman, after that experience mentally? How do they leave that game?
Times have changed, Raj. It used to be you had a bad game, you can go on with it and people would forget. And now you have the internet, and now you have social media. And these players go on the internet, they go on social media, and it could be a really toxic place, having to read about yourself, not performing well. It's not a great feeling. Listen, I don't care who you are. We had Christian Pulisic on Vamos, and he admitted he has two phones. He doesn't want social media on his phone. That's the elite of the elite for the U.S. men's national team. That's the top of the top.
The one thing I didn't understand about that, Hurt, was why does he have a second phone then? What's the second phone for?
His friends and family only. It's pretty much.
I'm saying I appreciate that. That's your friends and family only phone. So, but what would he ever use the other one for if he wants to avoid the internet?
Sometimes these athletes are entities, they're corporations, so they need to record things. So their social media teams can pump out and keep the machine going. I could understand that.
I love you. That makes sense. I thought it was a burner phone, but let's get back to where you're going with this. It affects them. They do read it. Yes. It does impact them. So that kind of a wobble can take a little moment to heal.
Of course, they're only human. And I don't care who the footballer is. If they tell you they don't go online, if they tell you they don't see social media, if they tell you they don't read up on what they're doing or people are saying about them, they are lying. Everybody does it. This can negatively impact a young player with a handful of caps. And I'll stay on Kevin Paredes, who grew up in the States, Major League Soccer, DC United, who has an affinity, always wanted to play for the U.S. men's national team. I'm positive he's heard, he's seen, he's read all these things about him. So it's up to him now and how he can confront these issues going forward. But it's not an easy thing to see.
I've got to be honest. The thing I was most shocked about in the impotent period was leadership. or the lack of it, because we celebrate this team rightfully for their youth, particularly in that first cycle. But it really showed on Thursday night against 10 men. By the way, just how much we missed Tyler Adams' prolonged absence. That's one of the things I felt most keenly. But we really lacked intelligent leadership, particularly in our opponent's half, calming the gents down, directing traffic. Who had the experience to know how to play 11 on 10? Our boys, as you say, just kept rushing it straight up the gut. I'm sure the Trinidad and Tobagans were just elated. Instead of swinging the ball from side to side and physically and mentally exhausting our opponent, we just kept rushing exactly where they wanted us. Matt Turner and Tim Ream are real leaders in that setup, in that culture. But those two gents are not up there in the final third. When your players are this green and not in a Julian Green kind of way, and we're into the second cycle with this squad, but is this still inevitable, that inexperience?
I don't care how experienced you are, you're entitled to a bad day. We could throw that out the window, right? A bad day, let's go. But Greg Berhalter needs to be more experienced. Greg Berhalter needs to be more mindful of what he does. Sometimes, and there are all types of leaders. There are leaders who are quiet and confident and can produce in their play, like Christian Pulisic. There are leaders who are vocal, like Tim Ream. I saw clips of Tim Ream and Greg Berhalter having discussions, on the sideline. And Tim Ream looks like an actual leader. He looks like he's got a good grasp of what's going on. And then you've got those guys that are somewhere in between, like a Weston McKennie. I thought Weston McKennie was very, very good. But Greg Berhalter at halftime, with your movements, you could send a message. If you pull Kevin Paredes, if you pull Malik Tillman, you can send a message that what you just seen isn't what the U.S. men's national team is about. And in those movements, which he eventually did, it was Ricardo Pepi and Brandon Aronson coming on for those two players. The tactical setup is different. It becomes more of a 4-4-2, if you will, 4-4-1-1 with Balogun and Ricardo Pepi. And you already announced your posture is going to be different, that the setup will be different, the attack will be different. So there are ways to go about this. And you spoke about these players being green, and I've always said it. These players are green, absolutely. But some of these players, when they were green, were starting at Chelsea, winning Champions League. Some of these players, when they were green, were at Leipzig playing in UCL, the Champions League semifinals. Some of these players, when they were green, were playing under Pep Guardiola. Some of these players, when they were green, were winning titles at Juventus. And Greg Berhalter, when he was green, was at the Columbus Crew. So there's a massive difference here. And Greg Berhalter is still growing as manager as well.
Yeah, as you said, the first US shot did not come until the 55th minute. And by the way, I did keep picturing Jesus Ferreira, your pirate of the Caribbean. I like to think of him sitting at home. I like to imagine that he wore for Halloween an actual Captain Jack Sparrow costume. I have no information that actually happened, but I'm trying to ship it into becoming a fact. I like to think he watches US games. He's not playing in that Jack Sparrow outfit. And Lord, he must have been sitting there thinking, without me, these guys are nothing. Which brings me to Folarin Balogun. Another CONCACAF night, another frustrated figure cut. Gent has so many strengths as a striker. His movement, his pace, his ability to break through the lines. But this system that the United States play doesn't lean into them. And we've talked about that before. But what are you seeing Thursday? How do you understand what will be going through his mind? Is it possible to unlock Pete Balogun in the Greg Berhalter system?
That's a loaded question, because I don't believe the Greg Berhalter system, Berhalter ball, allows a 9 to thoroughly flourish, to be the finisher, if you will. Ricardo Pepi, when he gets his goals, he's coming on in the second half, and the game's a bit more open, a bit more forced. They have to look for those plays, or the opposition has to try to open up because they're down. So it's a little bit easier for him to find that space. And I think Pepi is just better suited to play that link-up play, is better suited to be that 9, if you will, out of the 2. But Folarin Balogun's just movements are so crisp. He's so intelligent in the final third and how he addresses the space. The best thing he did in the game versus Trinidad and Tobago was actually understanding that the space wasn't for him, and the little dummy that Gio Reyna does and the layoff right to him, it's beautifully done. One of the best things he has going for him is he really has a good understanding of how Gio Reyna wants to play. And if you have a good understanding about how the best player on the field wants to play, the kid with the highest ceiling in the program wants to play, you could be successful. My worry for him is Ricardo Pepi's not going away. Ricardo Pepi has quietly continued to score goals in every single time or every single game he's played for the U.S. men's national team. And I'll repeat what I said last episode. He's got the misfortune right now of having to wait for his turn at PSV behind the team captain and one of the front runners for the MVP in the Eredivisie, which is Luc de Jong. 10 goals, like 6 assists. He's absolutely on fire. Peter Bosz, his coaches even said, the managers even said, I feel bad for Ricardo because when he comes on, he scores and he does well, but he's playing behind Luc de Jong. Folarin Balogun's getting opportunities. He's not scored in the last 4 games for his club. In 2 of those games, one of those games he came out halftime. The other game he only played 17 minutes. So he's having a little bit of a frustrating time at club. And that's kind of translating over to the national team. So Greg Berhalter's got to find a way to get this guy on the field in positions that you can expose his movements because he's so good at that.
I mean, this game changed, as you said. Thank the football script writers. In the 66th minute, on came a quite kinetic, hungry Brendan Aronson, eager to show his brother Paxton, like some kind of New Jersey Montel Jordan. This is how we do it. But the real game changer, a gent both you and I adore and revere. Oh, Ricardo Daniel Pepi, the Amtrak Texas Eagle, out of El Paso via PSV Eindhoven. Still only 20 years of age. Feels like he's been around forever. Yet already a great American. Herc, let me ask this as a question. Is there a case to be made that in 2023, Ricardo Pepi has been the most important US men's international because he can put the ball in the back of the bloody net, which was our problem, or one of our problems in World Cup 2022, and was a problem Thursday night until he arrived like a giant Texan Mighty Mouse, just arriving to save the day.
Before I answer that, can I just say, you and I called it. Folarin Balogun absolutely thought that the Aronson brothers were the same person. He was so confused as why they look alike. I don't know how we predicted that, but we were pretty spot on there, Raj.
I know, and I love him. I love Ballo all the more for it. God bless. This world needs more Aronsons.
I love the group. The group just seems like an actual group, an actual good family time. So I love that about these guys. All right, Ricardo Pepi. Ricardo Pepi is something else because I'm trying to think of a player in the program's recent history who has been so vital to a coach, but that coach has still resisted said player in how they give him the opportunity and how important that player is to the manager. Because if you go back to last World Cup cycle, he saved Greg Berhalter's job. He saves this manager's job, and he doesn't go to the World Cup. And he comes back, and he keeps bailing him out of situations and oftentimes making Greg Berhalter look like a genius because one could argue, well, Greg Berhalter is getting the best out of this player. One could argue that. One could seriously argue, look, Greg Berhalter knows exactly when to use him. And I've been in that situation where you're doing extremely well as a substitute, and it's a dangerous role to have because you get typecast as a super sub. But Ricardo Pepi at 20 years of age, just how mature he is, any other forward, any other player would be going crazy, would probably already come out publicly and say, mate, what do you want? The guy who comes on before me doesn't score, doesn't play that well. I come on and I score again, and I've scored again, and I've scored again. I'm now historic. What do I need to do to make this my own? And to his credit, he's not said that. He's bit his tongue. He's waited. And he's performed. And he's 20 years old. If you've not had a chance to sit down and just listen to the kid and his story, I encourage you. We recorded with him a few months ago, and the kid is just insanely wise. I mentioned that he not only plays for the crest in the front, but he plays for the name on the back, the Pepi name. He's the head of the household at 20 years of age. Like, he's just so mature, so composed, and he keeps growing as a footballer.
You said historic, and it was historic. Ricardo Pepi, with that goal, became first player in US men's history to score 5 goals as a substitute in a single calendar year. That finish, the swivel, and that just instinctive angle clinicality that unfurled. It gets better every time you watch it, that goal.
It does. It's you know, you need to have a good intuition if you're a 9. Be resourceful, and he's as resourceful as they come. Not only in the way he finishes, but the way he tries to facilitate for others. If you go back to one of the last games, I believe it was Oman. He came on for a very brief time versus Oman. He scored a goal, but he had a play where he kind of like no looks one times it, with his back to goal to Weston McKennie, and Weston McKennie kind of chopped it up like he should have just slotted it. He didn't really have a good crack at it, but it just goes to show you how composed and how centered he is and how the moment's just right for him. And you mentioned that historic feat of the 5 goals from substitute positions. Eddie Johnson's one of them that I believe he just surpassed or tied. I'm not too sure on that one, but Eddie Johnson had like multiple goals in some of those substitute appearances. And I've always been told, don't look for the amount of goals a forward scores. Look for the amount of games a forward scores goals in. That's the important feat. And Ricardo Pepi, he's one of those players. He makes his mark every time he's on.
So Pepi versus Ballo. This is our striker QB1 battle. Who do you believe will get the start tonight? Who should? Who will? Ballo has all the hype, the hope. Pepi has, well, the body of work, aka the goals.
Yeah, I think tonight the start will be for Fowler and Balogun. I think it should be for Ricardo Pepi. And the reason I say it's for Fowler and Balogun is I think Greg Berhalter's trying to get him going. And rightfully so. You want a player that you heavily recruited, a player that you heavily believe in to get going a bit, confidence-wise, and carry that over to his national team. Greg Berhalter's actually been very good about that. He's been wonderful for some of these players who have been struggling at the club level. He finds ways to get them going, and hopefully that carries over to their club situation. He's done it plenty of times with Christian Pulisic. One time he benched Christian Pulisic against Mexico, and I was thinking, what is he doing? And he unlocks Christian Pulisic at the right moment, and it's a Timothy Weah, cross Christian Pulisic header in Cincinnati for the 2-0. So he's very good at doing things like that. I think that's going to be the situation tonight. I think it should be Ricardo Pepi.
It is. By the way, that is Greg Berhalter's great asset, is the culture that he's built into this team. You speak to so many of these gents, like Chris Richards, also not getting minutes at Crystal Palace, how nourished they are by being around and playing for this team. And it's something that we should not take for granted. One other talking point I do need to touch upon quickly. Anthony Robinson made it 2-0 with a fine thrash, bit of a deflecto. He then unfurled his signature somersault celebration. He stuck the landing like a soccer Kerry Strug. And you tweeted, Herc, are we doing backflips for scoring a second goal versus 10-man TNT? Get back to midfield. Need more goals. A tweet which took a lot of crap. Stu Holden tweeted, yeah, those 3 extra seconds were costly. I had a feeling that I understood what you were getting at, Herc, that this is really a mindset thing. And you saw that a minute later when Gio Reyna scored an excellent goal, but barely celebrated, or actually just let out a breath of frustration overall performance-wise. But Herc, take a minute, make your case.
Yeah, it's not even the case. So my tweet is a lot of what you're saying right there. And there's also context. Like, the scoreline doesn't reflect what just happened. You scored your first goal against a team that was playing probably an hour worth with a player down, a man disadvantage, minute 82, in a game that has been very frustrating. And in a game that if Trinidad and Tobago score a goal, that's an away goal, which applies. So it puts you in a very difficult situation. And he scores a banger. And I have no problem with Anthony Robinson, who's a fabulous player, and I think has been one of the standout players since he started playing for Greg Berhalter. But doing a backflip in that situation, there's very, very little to celebrate. And I will just add, people are like, oh, the no phone police. I'm just not a fan of flips and celebrations to begin with, because it can lead to no good. I don't know if you remember 2007, 2008, Fabian Espindola of Real Salt Lake, a forward, scored this ridiculous goal. I believe it was here in Los Angeles, and then proceeds to do flips, breaks his foot. I'm a massive UFC fan, and I cringe every time the fighters get on top of the cage and do a flip. And I'm like, what are you trying to do? Like, you could only get injured. So it's part of that. Like, I don't think most people understand the context. It's not just the celebration of, because I heard people trying to compare Oliver Giroud's celebration of the 14th goal to the U.S. women at a World Cup. Like, U.S. women at a World Cup, that's the pinnacle for any athlete, any soccer player. It's a World Cup. You score a goal, celebrate any way you want. I don't care. It's the World Cup. It's not some random game against Gibraltar where you're just trying to run up the score. So I saw people trying to make correlations to that. But Anthony Robinson's entitled to do whatever he wants to do. I just didn't think it was very smart.
God bless you. All I ask, Anthony Robinson, you magnificent human being, is just stay blonde forever now. It's just like blonde Anthony Robinson always scores. To tonight's game, return for the first time for the United States to Trinidad since that darkest of losses, 2017 at Couva. Whole new squad of players. Tim Ream, actually the one lone holdover from that disaster squad. And he said that, quote, it's been put so far out of mind, I'm not even thinking about it. So let's put that storyline aside, talk about the prospect of tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT and Universo. Herc, you're a US player in CONCACAF. What is it like going to one of these Caribbean islands? You know, the athletics track setup, the pitch as bald as Rog, just CONCACAF-y footballing conditions. Can you describe to us what a leveler it can be?
Yeah, I remember people don't realize. So under Jurgen Klinsmann, they made it out. The U.S. men's national made it out of the group of death in 2014. It was Portugal, Germany, Ghana. I mean, easily one of the most difficult groups, if not the most difficult, and they made it out of that group. They were first place in World Cup qualifying. It was smooth sailing. People forget before the Hex, the U.S. men's national team almost did not make it to the hexagonal. I was part of that. It took Alan Gordon and Eddie Johnson in a cricket field in Antigua and Barbuda to bail us out. 2 late goals for us to go on to the next round. If not, we don't even go on to the next round. It was that crazy of a situation. We played on a cricket field in monsoon weather. It's like the scene in Forrest Gump where he's explaining how the rain goes from up to down, sideways, circles, wind. It was one of those moments. The field was flooded. The ball would not advance. It's mud everywhere. It just felt like a situation where you're like, where am I? What is this? This isn't football. You can sometimes be in that type of situation against opponents who because they're not as developed footballistically as your country or as other athletes, maybe do things in a way that can get you hurt. And I go back to Weston McKennie in this game. Weston McKennie was beat up the whole game. I thought it was one of these situations where he may not get out physically fit. Sometimes the opponents don't play the correct way, and that increases your chance of injury. So it's very complicated. That said, it's different this go around because I don't recall a situation where I had to go in to a matchup with a CONCACAF opponent thinking about the away goal. And people don't realize that. Go back to Anthony Robinson, the away goal. You have a situation now where Trinidad and Tobago are forced, if they want to try to advance out of this, to push forward and score goals. And one goal for you opens them up even more. So it's a different animal here. It could be a lot easier for you. It's context there.
God willing, tonight, yes, the American boys just need a draw or defeat by fewer than 3 goals to advance to the March Final Four in Arlington, Texas. As you mentioned, Weston McKennie out after taking quite a kicking. Juventus will be thrilled to have seen him depart camp after aggravating a knee knock, and we wish him speedy recovery. To this game, USA 3-0 up. Trinidad really are in a you telling me there's a chance territory. Herc, is this over And what is the mindset that there is to play for? As a professional, what is the mindset, the real mindset?
Professional. It's for some of these players to solidify their positions within the U.S. men's national team and in front of Greg Berhalter. If you're Ricardo Pepi, continue to score. If you're Folarin Balogun, use this as a way to get yourself going at the club level. But it really is that. I don't think they're in any danger, Raj. I mentioned the away goal. Um, if Trinidad really wants to win this game, they have to push forward. That's going to open up a team like Trinidad. That's going to exploit the talents of a player like Folarin Balogun, whose main bread and butter is his movement. And if the U.S. men's national team score a goal, they have to push forward even more Trinidad and look for more goals. I think this all plays in the hands of the U.S. men's national team, and I could see a very professional performance here.
I do want to give, by the way, to Trinidad and Tobago and fans listening, huge credit to your team. Really, the greatest fighting ampersands in CONCACAF. Coach Angus Eve, Thursday night, I've got to say, I had them playing with a collective ferocity and a discipline for long periods, almost like a CONCACAF David Moyes. Goalkeeper Denzel Smith had himself a night. That Thursday was not a one-sided game. I'd say Trinidad and Tobago deserve huge credit for that. I'm fascinated right now. Greg talked post-game. I thought honestly and admirably, Herc, that CONCACAF opponents are not exactly what this program needs right now to get World Cup ready. He said, when we talk about the opportunity to play teams like Brazil, Germany, Spain, that's the real learning experience for our group. What should we be judging the team on tonight? Is it the result? Is it the quality of play, the idea of football, the tactical cohesion? Really, what should we want? What should we be judging as a win, not just the scoreboard?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the result and the play. And in the play, by no means do I mean aesthetically. I mean putting in a performance, a professional performance to get out with what you need. This is a 180-minute game. You just finished 90 minutes. People need to really, really just set apart any type of performance they see tonight and think that's going to be concrete law of what's going forward. What you need to do tonight is just advance and advance in a way where you're physically fit, advance in a way where you don't pick up any unneeded suspensions, advance in a way where it's just you put in the work and get out. Um, this is unlike the World Cup. And what I mean by that is I am not worried about the U.S. men's national team at the World Cup trying to break down a low block. That's not what I'm worried about, and not what you should be worried about either if you're a fan of the U.S. men's national team. It's exactly what Greg Berhalter said. It's what do you do when you all of a sudden have a team like the Netherlands in front of you, Spain in front of you? That's what you got to work on. That's what you have to be better at, not trying to break down a low block against one of these type of teams. So look for the professional performance, look for no injuries, no suspensions, and look for players who are trying to pick up some confidence to go take it back to their clubs.
God, my last ever interview with Jurgen Klinsmann before he was fired, he talked seriously about wanting to move the United States into CONMEBOL, which I loved. And like Australia moved from their region to Asia to get better games in between World Cups, and it's crazy, but quite fantastic. I do believe Greg Berhalter's team talk will include, win one for the memory of Bruce Arena, make him proud up there in the sky, wherever he is now. But I want to touch on Mexico for one quick second. But first, spoiler alert time. Tell me, Herc, what will the score be tonight in Trinidad and Tobago? And what will we be talking about the final whistle?
Yeah, I think, Trinidad didn't try to threaten at all in the first leg. They were just trying to go with minimal damage back to Trinidad and Tobago. I think this game is plays into the hands of the U.S. men's national team with how you can play with the emotions of the opponent in an away goal rule type of setup. I think they score a goal, which obligates Trinidad and Tobago to just throw even more forward. I think it's going to be a 3-1 performance for the U.S. men's national team. I'll give Trinidad their goal because I think they have to push and get it.
God, I think this game is going to be 4-1. I do hope Trinidad and Tobago get a consolation goal. They deserve it absolutely. Ricardo Pepi will start, score a hat trick.
Oh,
Paxton Aronson will add a fourth late to totally confuse Folarin Balogun, who thinks, I like to believe that Paxton at this point is Brendan's dad. It's all going to be magnificent. Come be with us, by the way, after the match, live on Men in Blazers YouTube. We'll break the game down live, and you, dear GFOPs, can come up and join the conversation with your reactions and questions live on stage. It's going to be, I say Thursday night was so joyous and fun. I needed it. I think a lot of you loved it too. I can't wait for tonight. Come be with us immediately on the final whistle. But a quick note to put the United States 3-0 win in context. We mourn it. It's a disappointing win we talked about. But Herc, Mexico went to Honduras and crapped the bed in their first leg, 2-0. Guillermo Ochoa left the field in the 22nd minute with an injured shoulder. We wish him, that iconic goalkeeper, well. Mexico had 65% possession, but could barely muster a shot on target. And after dazzling in a 2-2 draw against Germany last window, they looked Thursday truly bloody terrible. My lord, I got to say, the prospect of a Copa America ticket sale boom without Mexico fans is probably not what the organisers want to think about. But you tweeted, I don't think this series is over, but playing at home has been difficult for El Tri. Oftentimes their own fans have been turning against them. Gut check. That was your tweet. The return leg is tomorrow night in the Azteca. Is it over? It's not over, is it, Herc?
I don't think it's over, but it's going to be very difficult, Raj. Let me just say, you go back the last 4 years of the Mexican national team, the last time they actually played well in official competition, not a friendly, because it's very easy to get up in a friendly to play against Germany. Those type of games are very easy to get up for. In an actual competition was 2019 with Tata Martino against the U.S. men's national team in the final of the Gold Cup, which they could have easily lost. It should have been 3-1 the U.S. men's national team 30 minutes in. Christian Pulisic missed a 1v1, Josie Altidore missed a 1v1, Paul Arriola missed a 1v1, and Mexico then went on cruise control after that. They won the game 1-0. It was the peak of the Tata Martino Mexico era, and we fast forward, in the last 16 months, they've had 3 coaches. They have no Olympic Games. They had no U20 World Cup. The women didn't go to a World Cup. We're experiencing one of the worst footballing eras in Mexico's history. And then they show you something with Jimmy Lozano, a Gold Cup trophy. Many would argue that Gold Cup trophy comes with an asterisk because the U.S. men's national team did not send their A team and Canada did not send their A team. But they give you enough hope to think that they're back. El Gigante is back. The Giants of CONCACAF are back. And then they show you how good they can be versus Germany. And it almost blinds you of the reality that they didn't beat Australia, didn't look good against Australia. They didn't beat Uzbekistan, looked very poor against Uzbekistan. And oftentimes this team still struggles to not only generate quality goal scoring opportunities, but to defend quality goal scoring opportunities. So you play against the worst Honduran team of our generation, which was the narrative heading into this game. You would have expected something with a lineup that I thought everybody was very pleased with. They want Santi Jimenez to play. Why doesn't he play? Santi Jimenez plays. He starts. Memo Ochoa won't give up the gloves, won't give up the number 1 position. What happens if Memo Ochoa is not there? You have to get the next generation ready. All these things came to a head, and Honduras played them off the park. Luis Palma, he's a striker for Celtic, was one of the best players on the field, producing quality looks after looks for the Honduran national team. El Choco Lozano, who plays in La Liga for Getafe, these are quality players that Mexico gave quality time and looks to, and they hurt you. And you mentioned it. Mexico barely mustered a shot on goal. Mexico didn't look like they belonged on the field. And now heading back to the Azteca, where their fans are unforgiving, this could be bad. Because I mentioned the away goal when I spoke about the U.S. men's national team. If Honduras score 1 goal, Raj, Mexico has to score 4. They have to score 4 goals. A 3-3 tie in aggregate means that Mexico does not go through. They have to score 4 if Honduras score 1. So I think we're in store for some drama.
CONCACAF and drama, you say? Who could believe that? But Herc, I cannot wait for these games to unfurl. I cannot wait to share them with you. Can't wait to be on YouTube live tonight. But last question. This is Thanksgiving week, and I am about to head back to Liverpool tomorrow to be with my dad, my mum, my family. And we all have so much to be thankful for. Incredible time to be covering football in this nation. The world, let's just say, a lot of chaos and challenge outside of football. But I want to finish by asking you, Herc, can you give us one thing that you are thankful for, you beautiful bloke, at this time?
Raj, I'm sure there are a few people who kind of can relate to what we do in this business, and I'm sure you will understand this. I'm very thankful for my family. Oftentimes, I'm very consumed in what I do, consumed in trying to grow what I am trying to do, that I forget about my family. And we're coming off a few years where the world has changed. COVID hit. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was scared for my family. I was scared for our future. It seems like every year we go forward, we move forward with an extension of our family. And what I mean by that is I've now grown into the Men in Blazers family. I'm grateful for you guys, for the friends I have. I go back and see my family in Las Vegas, and I run into my brother, on the streets in Vegas, and here we are. He's a cop now. It's I'm just so thankful for family, the family that I have, the family that I choose, the family that I continue to grow with. Because you're right, this world is changing, and it can be a scary place sometimes. So I'm thankful for my tribe.
To you, to the Gomezes, to Ulysses in particular, your fantastic brother. It's been a joy, honestly, as we approach the first year conclusion of you and Juan Castro and the whole Vamos team. Just an incredible joy in all of our lives. To you, to health, to happiness, her. You're a beautiful human being. Go, USMNT. And thanks, man.
Godspeed to Ian Dark for that Go Go USA. I love it.
Also thankful to, God bless. I miss Sir Ian. Courage.